Asian Americans are under spotlights recently, but from Asian Americans' perspective, how are they being discriminated? Why race matters so much in today's America, and what's the implication to the Asian American community and America as a country? Welcome to Sound of Hope News. I'm Kathy Zhang. In this episode, I will bring you the views to those questions from the angle of a young Asian American. Kenny Xu is an author and a commentary writer who is born and raised in the United States, and his parents are immigrants from mainland China. He is publishing a book with the title of An Inconvenient Minority, the Ivy League Admissions Cases and the Attack on Asian American Excellence. So why can he call Asian American an inconvenient minority? You are probably as curious as I am, and we'll find out. So first of all, Kenny, welcome to our show.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Kathy.
So Kenny, can you tell us what your book is about and why you wrote this book?
And my book talks specifically about the Ivy League admissions cases that are going on. As many of your audiences know, a group of Asian Americans are suing Harvard University for discriminating against them in the name of admitting less qualified minorities of other skin colors. And it just raises a lot of different issues about America, about what's going on in America today. Are we living in a world where race is starting to matter and your background is going to matter more than your merit or your individual character? And, growing up, I was always passionate about that issue because I was an Asian American. I was a minority in my own school, and I often doubted that. I wanted to be like the cool kids. And now, after hearing the injustice about what elite colleges are doing to Asian Americans and making them score higher and making them be better, and then still calling them bad personalities for doing that, I see this is an issue that we really need to fight. Asian Americans of all different peoples and backgrounds.
Mm-hmm. Based on your understanding, why in today's America race matters so much?
Well, I think there are a lot of here. First of all, in the 60s, when civil rights was passed, we were supposed to unite under one umbrella, that Martin Luther King's dream of, I have a dream that my children would be judged not on the color of their skin, but the content of their character, right? We were supposed to unite under that banner. Mm-hmm. But what happened was, because of a lot of activism, you had the government under Lyndon B. Johnson create basically a racial quota system. And this was a racial quota system for hiring, for college admissions. There was a lot of fight to try to boost underprivileged minorities, or what they perceived were underprivileged minorities. And they integrated these racial quotas in hiring through the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. So big businesses had to have certain racial quotas for hiring, or else they would be subject to audit. And what that did was that institutionalized race in our country's fabric. And now 50 years later, we're still wading through that, in the sense we're still asking ourselves questions like, how much does race really matter? Are we coming into a society where race is mattering less, or are we coming into a society where race is mattering more? And I think that because of what the government did 50 years ago, institutionalizing race in our bureaucracy, because of what elite colleges are doing through affirmative action and race preferences, because of critical race theory now, which is being put into our K-12 classrooms, and kids are being taught to view themselves and other people through the lens of race and racism. You're getting this movement now, I think, to reinstitutionalize race back into our society, and I think it's very dangerous.
Many people always say that some minority groups in the United States are underprivileged. Kenny, how do you think?
Make no mistake, I'm a very privileged person. I think everyone in America is to some extent privileged, because we live in a free country. We don't live in a country that oppresses its own people. We still have a country where we have opportunity, and we have great opportunity. That's why we accept millions of immigrants per year, coming to this country. This is why it's a land of opportunity. In terms of within the country, who are the privileged and oppressed? Well, I think dividing that by race is very dangerous. One, because there are a substantial number of very privileged Black and Hispanic Americans today. They're very wealthy. And because of that, what Harvard's admission system does is it actually rewards the rich, wealthy Black Americans and the rich, wealthy Latino Americans who check off those boxes, because not only are they, Black doctors, Black lawyers, but their kids are now getting preferential treatment in admissions, not because they are, poor, but because they're, a certain color of skin. And so that means that they're doubly privileged at that point. So I don't think that dividing this country on the basis of race and labeling some races as privileged and some as oppressed is really going to do the lower income people of all different races, any kind of favors.
So you believe that the government institutionalized race was the root cause. Why is that?
Yes, I think that because that's where the money comes from. You have these grants and you have, for example, if you're the government, you have to give a certain percentage of your contracts to minority-owned businesses, particularly Black-owned businesses and Native American-owned businesses. And so because of that, you have this industry that is based on race, that is heavily based on race, and it very much incentivizes race, racial, categorization. I think that it stems from the bureaucracy, but it's also being taught in Ivy League colleges. I remember when I went to Davidson, which is not an Ivy League, but it's, a similarly selective college. I was taught, in my freshman year of college, I remember going to this diversity seminar, and they said, look, here's the white people, they're at the top, Blacks are at the bottom, and Asian Americans and as well as Jewish Americans are kind of in the middle. They have a racial hierarchy already set up for you to gain oppression points in colleges. And I think so many people of my generation are being subject to that framework today, and I think it's horribly wrong.
So Kenny, you were also educated in the same education system, but why you came to different understanding than other young people?
That's interesting that you mentioned that question. I came to a different understanding because I believe in the value of culture and in the value of hard work, right? This is still a country where if you work hard, you can achieve great things in this society. You can achieve great things in this country. For example, I mean, we as Chinese Americans, we understand that, if you study hard, you will get better test scores. You'll get better grades. That's just the way it is. What's the way to get better test scores? It's not because you're necessarily inherently smart, although some are, but if you work hard and you prepare, you can get a better score. It's the same thing with anything, Even for me, just writing this first book, I had no name recognition coming out of college to write this book, but I had this idea and I pitched it to many, many, many different agents, many different literary agents and many different publishers. And the vast majority of the time I was rejected this, rejected it at that. And then finally I got a call and an agent wanted to represent me. And I was overjoyed because it only takes one or two opportunities to set your ways running. And that's what happens in this country. There is so much opportunity. You just have to go and find it. And if we constantly victimize ourselves over our race and our racial condition, we are limiting ourselves. We are saying we can't do it, or you can't do it because of your race. Think about how harmful of a message that is to young minority children today, that you can't do it because of your race. You can do it. You can do it. There are not a lot of Asian American authors or people in media today, but I was able to find a path because I worked hard and I didn't have the connections, but I found a path anyways. And I think that can happen with people of any race, any color of their skin. They can live the American dream.
To some people, they really feel that some minority groups, such as the African American, they are underprivileged and therefore something has to be done to level the playing field. So what do you say about that?
if you really wanted to level the playing field, you have to invest in the sources of what's happening in this country. What are the sources of why some statistics say there is lower achievement among, certain groups than others? Is it because of their public schools? Is it because of their families? Is it because of family structure? Is it because of culture? Is it because of racial discrimination? If all of those things are true, then we need to invest in that level. But we cannot artificially try to bring up people who are less qualified to put in the more qualified spots, because we're doing a couple of different things there. First of all, we're giving the person who's less qualified a boost that they may not be able to handle. There are many studies that show that when you put people in law programs that they're less qualified for, or math programs that they're less qualified for, they have higher dropout rates, lower graduation rates, higher rates of depression, and then higher rates of changing majors. We don't want to encourage that. And then second of all, when you admit a less qualified applicant against a more qualified applicant, you inspire bitterness and resentment in the more qualified applicant too. And that I've seen that in people of my own community and people of different communities. I don't think it helps anybody.
So, Kenny, why is your book titled An Inconvenient Minority?
Asian Americans, we inconvenience the left's narrative on race, because the left's narrative on race is this, and everybody knows this. If you are white, you are white supremacist, you're privileged, many kind of bad, those kinds of things. If you're a person of color, you're a victim, and you're a victim of white supremacy. But what do they do with Asian Americans? Because Asian Americans are people of color. We faced historical discrimination. We faced racism. We faced all of those things. But if you look at the statistics today, Asian Americans have median incomes that are higher than whites. They have educational statistics that are higher than whites. How can that be if the narrative is about racism, if racism is oppressive? There's an element there that the left does not know how to address, because they don't know how to talk about culture. And so they choose to suppress us. They choose to suppress us from admissions. They choose to suppress us from the discourse. They choose to suppress us from the racial narrative. And that is what my book is trying to expose.
Actually, some elite Chinese Americans who are also well known, they support affirmative action because some feel that they themselves benefited from affirmative action, and the others may feel that Chinese Americans should be more considerate to other underprivileged groups. Kenny, what's your take on it?
There's been a concerted effort to try to take away Asian American self-respect in this country. And I think it's largely coming from elite institutions and from the left. The narrative is that Asians are anti-Black, that we are a model minority, that is, we're used by whites to to show Black people that they're, that something's wrong with them, which is not true at all, because there are a lot of successful Black Americans as well, just like there are many successful Asian Americans. And the purpose of this narrative is to make Asians feel guilty for achieving. That is the purpose of the narrative. This is what people in my generation are being taught in my college campuses today. They are actually taught that all of their hard work, that their merit, that their academic excellence is to be seen as privilege, is to be seen as something that they should feel guilty for and ashamed of. And I think this is very damaging. This is very damaging to the Asian American mind, because as soon as Asian Americans start thinking, oh, I need to stand up it's fine to stand up for underprivileged people of all different races, but you also have to stand up for yourself. You also have to be able to say to people, hey, I deserve what I got. I deserve what I got, and I have a responsibility to use it for the greater good. But you cannot come at this from a position of guilt. Because if you come at this from a position of guilt, then all of the things that people invested in you from a young age, whether your mother or your father, they invested all of this time helping you study. Your schools invested all of this time helping you achieve. Your teachers, your principals, your communities, your churches, they helped all of this time to invest in you. You are basically saying to them, no, I'm not worth it. And that's very bad because people are putting a lot of responsibility on you.
What kind of implication this could have to American society as a whole?
I think right now there is an attack on meritocracy right now that is happening. When you start treating people on the basis of their race and their background over the content of their character, you are taking away meritocracy. In the sense, you want to treat people on the basis of background, on things that they cannot control. So what does this mean? This means that when people are being treated on the basis of their background and things that they cannot control, then the way that they get access to opportunities is through creating the right victim story, not through actually working hard and achieving. Meaning that people are going to invest less time in building up productive skills like many Asian Americans do, skills in math, skills in science, skills in business. And they're going to spend more time creating the appropriate victim story, which is what you're going to increasingly see in our discourse today. I think that's the direction our country is going to go into unless we save it.
How do you think this could change America as a country?
Yeah, and I talk about this in my book, An Inconvenient Minority. The main thing that this identity politics revolution is going to do is it's going to take away meritocracy. And this is going to hurt Asian Americans at a level that is unprecedented. Because Asian Americans, we don't come from privilege. We don't have social connections. We largely came, in the past 50 years, so we don't have an extended cultural background in this country. So what do we rely on to help us succeed in this country? It's our merit. It's our skills. If people take away meritocracy and the elevation of people by merit, then many Asian Americans are going to have nothing left. They're going to be squeezed from our culture. I think what that's going to cause is it's going to cause a lot of Asian Americans to be squeezed and to be lowered in many statures of life. And then with regards to America, what you're saying, I think that's going to damage our culture of excellence. I think, when you start admitting people who are less qualified over people who are more qualified, you're going to get this cycle where you're going to have fewer highly qualified people in the nation, and then you're going to damage your culture of excellence at a time when we really need it, when America is competing with China in the tech war, when America is competing with the rest of the world in all kinds of things, at a time when freedom is at stake. We have to protect it, so we have to protect our culture of excellence.
Kenny shared his view on the consequence of identity politics, but then why the left is pushing identity politics so hard? And where's the hope for the people who are concerned about the direction of the United States? Please stay tuned for the second half of my interview with Kenny Xu.